Hey everyone, and Tom and I are back to talk about some more documentation. This module is designed as an orientation for new hires, physician and MLP, and who knows, even maybe some of the scribes.
Probably our residents too could look at it.
Residents, yeah, absolutely. But we also think maybe a good refresher for some of our more experienced providers. So we're here today to talk about the importance of your diagnosis in the chart and documentation. Last time we talked about medical decision making, so quick reminder, that includes the initial assessment, differential, ED course, and we went through a probably too long episode last time.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, but basically you're telling the story of what happened to the patient in the emergency department. So someone comes in, you look at them, you talk to them, you examine them, and then eventually a decision is made to admit, discharge, OBS, whatever it is. What happened? How did you come to that decision?
Right. But most people, when they look at your chart, are going to look at your diagnosis first and your medical decision making second.
Right.
We really love time progress notes, so please dot now everything you can. We feel this is the most important part of the chart, so we want you to spend most of your time in this area when you're documenting. So let's go ahead and talk about your diagnosis. Diagnosis, it's important to remember that it's not a final diagnosis, it's a discharge diagnosis. It's your best guess, your best idea of what's going on after you've evaluated the patient. So don't get too hung up on what the diagnosis is if you're not sure. This is probably most common in patients with abdominal pain.
Yeah, sure.
I would say.
You may have a patient with abdominal pain and you're pretty sure it's biliary colic, but you haven't done an ultrasound.
You can't prove it.
So you just say biliary. You can still put biliary colic. It's okay.
Right.
And then later it could be like, well, Dr. Wagner thought it was biliary colic, but they had the outpatient ultrasound and it looked okay. So it turns out it is whatever it is.
And maybe the more classic example is the patient who comes in with periumbilical abdominal pain. And you get labs and they're normal and the urine's clean and you do a CT scan and that looks fine, and so you're still not sure. Just use their chief complaint, abdominal pain, periumbilical, or you could use their symptoms, abdominal pain,
abdominal pain,
vomiting.
or abdominal pain generalized.
Yeah, exactly.
Symptoms are always a good idea to put in there. It's not a problem.
Historically, we have gotten in trouble if we've used rule out. That tends to be disallowed by insurance companies. Nowadays, with the way Epic is set up, you can't even choose rule out. You can still free text it in.
Yeah.
So you could say appendicitis and then free text in rule out, but we don't want you to do that. We'd rather you use the chief complaint or the symptoms.
Yeah, if you're concerned about something, so if someone's got abdominal pain and you're going to bring them back at 12 hours for a recheck because you think they have early appendicitis, the diagnosis can be abdominal pain, and probably, I'm sure, if you listen to our last
hopefully your medical decision making
you would have put in the medical decision making that I'm concerned about early appendicitis, will bring the patient back in 12 hours.
Right. And last but not least, remember that whatever you put for your diagnosis really needs to be supported by the chart.
Exactly.
So with a couple other finer points on diagnosis, currently, as of June 2015, we are using ICD-9. In October of this year, we're going to start using ICD-10.
So you may not even know what these are, but what ICD-9 and ICD-10 are diagnosis schemes. So every time you put a diagnosis on the chart, a coder will translate that diagnosis into a numerical code. That is the way we talk to insurance companies about getting paid. So abdominal pain's got a code. Appendicitis has got a code. Right upper quadrant abdominal pain has got a code. And so there's lots and lots and lots of codes for ICD-9. What they did for ICD-10 is took all those codes for ICD-9 and they made about 20 times more codes.
Right.
So now literally there's tens of thousands of codes.
I think it's 40,000 is the new number. And most of the changes involve laterality and initial versus subsequent encounters.
Right.
And it tends to really impacted orthopedics. It took their number of diagnoses and basically exponentially increased it.
So what you want to do is, in your diagnosis, you want to try to be as specific as you can. If you want to comply with ICD-10, and probably you've had some ICD-10 lectures or training up till now, but if you want to comply with it as best you can, be as specific as you can. So if someone's got a right distal radius fracture, and it's the first time you're seeing them for it,
it's
closed right distal radius fracture, non-displaced, initial encounter. You can be a little less specific, and you don't even have to spend a lot of time searching for the exact perfect code. The coders can put in the specific code. You can put radius fracture, and then underneath it in the notes put right distal, closed, initial.
Right.
So don't be scared when you hit when you type in like radius fracture and you get 50 possibilities. You don't feel like you've got to read through all those 50
Right.
possibilities. Just put in there what the patient has, and they'll take care of it. The other thing, acute versus chronic, initial versus subsequent, right versus left. Also, one thing I did learn, anybody that has any kind of respiratory difficulty, somewhere in your chart, it doesn't have to be in your diagnosis, document whether they smoke or not or have been exposed to tobacco, because the government's very concerned about that.
Yeah, thank God the government's concerned about it.
Yeah, they're here to help.
They are. Other thoughts, remember that this is the first thing that other providers are going to see. It does communicate your thinking. And that we've talked about this before, but remember that what you put for your diagnosis doesn't actually drive what the coders bill for. That we've talked in depth about that. I will not bring out another multi-column, multi-row chart for Tom to make fun of.
No.
But the diagnosis can drive down codes from the insurance companies. So if you diagnose, I'm trying to think of a classic one.
Well, pain versus injury.
Sure.
Okay. So somebody falls down and they hurt their shoulder, but it's not broken. So if you put shoulder pain, there's a good possibility that some person and
most likely Medicaid.
Right. Some person and or any person in an insurance company's going, this wasn't an emergency. It was just shoulder pain.
Right.
We're going to
downgrade it to a triage fee.
Or we're going to just disallow it completely. Then
Right.
the patient gets stuck with a big bill.
Right.
When really the patient had an injury and it's like, oh, they injured themselves. That's why they went to the ER. That's okay.
Right. So to wrap up, you don't need to know the diagnosis, but your chart has to be able to has to support whatever conclusion you made. Remember that it does communicate your thinking, even though it's only one line, and that it doesn't drive revenue. So next up, we're starting to complete kind of the basics of documentation. Next time, we are going to talk about what we like to call the art of the chart, or little tips and tricks that we've learned over the years to make your charting better.
All right.
So,
it's good.
as always, if you guys have questions or comments, please drop us a line, give us a call, and we will talk to you next time.